Let's just say the two gutters that you want to put up guardrails against would be the love of money and debt.
Okay, there you go.
And so what
That's
we're
good.
going to try to
That's better.
teach is we're trying to avoid debt and we're trying to avoid the love of money. And the playing field, the strike, I think to go with that is really stewardship.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the FYI podcast, where we talk about faith, life, adulting, relationships, and so much more. I'm Micah Keneally.
I'm Josiah Keneally. We're your hosts, and it's a joy to be on this journey with you. Thanks for subscribing. Like Micah said, we drop new episodes every single Friday. We unpack your question as the listener. Allie sent us a DM. She asked, how do I set up myself for success financially as a young adult? So today's topic is on budgeting and finances and just setting yourself up for success. And we love when you share this with others. Maybe you have a roommate or a friend or a sibling or a parent who's stressed about money. God's word has a lot to say about finances. Thanks for subscribing to this content wherever you're streaming it. Thanks for sharing the message with others. And do you want to share the verse of the day, babe?
Oh, I'd love to share. The verse of the day comes from Proverbs 10, 4-5, and it says, "He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame." And I think that's just a powerful verse. It's more like the farming, the harvesting and everything, the rest seasons and stuff like that is kind of what they're alluding to. But also we know that anything that we do, we put our hands to, and we should do it for the glory of God. And that is anything from classroom work to stewarding relationships, taking care of the things that God has given us, working in whatever job you find yourself in, that we should all do unto the glory of God. And one of the things that we talk a lot about with young adults is finances, because finances are hard. Young adulting is hard. Inflation is hard. And so we're going to hear a little bit of my take, Josiah's take, and then we contacted one of our financial friends who has a little bit of insight for the listener today as well. So Josiah, do you want to start? And then I'll go, and then we'll tap into the friends' notes. How's that?
For sure. I just want to say this about Micah brought up the Proverbs, and this is a book of wisdom. This was largely written by King Solomon, who said to, before Jesus, be the wisest person who ever lived. In fact, I was just reading the Proverbs, and a couple of days ago, I journaled this, and I thought it was so powerful. It said that, let's see if I can find it with Proverbs. I won't waste too much time for the listener, but there was like no king, no equal among kings. When Solomon prays for wisdom in 1 Kings 3:13, God says you will have no equal among kings. So the wisdom that Solomon had throughout his life and Proverbs, it was like he would be one of the trending Twitter or X or, Threads accounts, because he would just be sharing wisdom before it was cool to do it in 280 characters or less. There's just a lot of wisdom. And in researching, like if you asked what percentage of the Proverbs have to do with money or finances, you want to take a guess? Type in the chat on YouTube or the comments. What percentage of the Proverbs do you think have to do with money? What would you say?
Well, I'm thinking 60.
Close. 40%. 40% of the Proverbs have to do.
I knew it was going to be a lot.
Yeah, like 40% of the Proverbs have to do with money. When you study the teachings of Jesus, Jesus taught on money more than any other subject. And I think his reason why is where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's literally what Jesus said in the red letters, is where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And to compare and contrast that, we were recently teaching on relationships, and I did a study on Proverbs because I think it's Proverbs 5, 6, and 7. Okay. Which out of about 30 chapters, 31 chapters on Proverbs, like 10% of the Proverbs are a warning against adultery. But then you look at, wow, that's important. Like back to back, some writers would use that as underscore to say like, holy, 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 or here's a warning, here's a warning, like pay attention. And I look at, wow, we should take note when 40% of the Proverbs and roughly 40% of the teachings of
Yeah.
Jesus have to do with stewardship and avoiding debt and just giving generously to the poor and so forth.
Well, here's what I would say. Keeping in mind that when we talk about finances and money, shame should not be attached to it, even though you might have some bad spending habits or some gambling problems or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity for your finances to be redeemed, for you to be set free, and for you to recognize that God gave us 90% of his money that we earned,
Yep.
and we only offer 10% back through our tithes. He allows us to keep 90%, and he blesses that 90 when we give that 10, the
Yep.
first, like the first crop, the first 10%. And then really realize that money is a tool to be utilized for God's kingdom, to take care of his people, to provide our needs, to bless those around us. And so when we realize that there are dreams and desires and aspirations of every single young adult that we've come across,
Yep.
the number one thing that is a stumbling block are spending habits, which spending habits are attached to money, which is the dollar bill, which we have earned or which we've spent before we've even gotten our paycheck.
Yep.
So with money, I think comes a lot of natural guilt, shame, or misuse, because it's, we don't want to idolize money.
Right.
We want to love the Lord and utilize it well. So just keeping that in mind, wherever you're at with money, wherever you're at with finances today, that you can develop healthy spending habits, healthy giving habits, and have healthy saving habits in the process. But what it takes from you is discipline.
Yep.
Discipline. It's kind of like when you go to business school and they would say, where are you going to plant your business or your store or your pop-up shop or whatever? They would say location, location, location. I would say with money, it is discipline, discipline, discipline. And every dollar should have
an assignment.
There you go. That's great. An assignment.
I love what you just said there about discipline. I picture in bowling, how
the bumpers,
if you're a beginner or if you're not as good as Micah, I don't think I've ever won a single game of bowling. And we've bowled a fair amount, whether it was dating or now in marriage or a family bowling.
Let you win.
And Micah's pretty talented and competitive. But for our daughters, if they're learning to bowl, you put up the bumpers so you've kind of got guardrails.
Yeah.
If you go over a bridge, you don't want to go overboard. So there's cement blocks and barriers and guardrails. Andy Stanley teaches that guardrails direct and protect.
Yep.
Shows you this is the way to go, and if it's going to prevent you from going into the ditch or overboard or in the gutter. And I think of one of the gutters is the love of money.
And it's easy to get there if you.
Yeah, because money isn't a sin. Money, you could even say, is amoral. It's money in itself is like a book or a currency or a table. It's a tablet. This just happens to be a paper or coin or digitized form of currency, but it's amoral in and of it because it could sit on the ground, it could sit in an account, but it's the love of money that's the gutter, and you want to stay out. So you want to build barriers. I'd say greed is similar to the love of money, but greed, debt would be let's just say the two gutters that you want to put up guardrails against would be the love of money and debt.
Okay, there you go.
And so what we're going to try to teach is we're trying to avoid debt and we're trying to avoid the love of money. And the playing field, the strike, I think to go with that is really stewardship.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that, look at Jesus when he taught on the parable of the talents, he's going to give some people 1 talent. He's going to give other people 2 talents. He's going to give other people 5. You don't want to bury it in the sand out of fear.
Right.
What you want is you want the return on that investment, putting it to work, being a steward who's open-handed, recognizing that, we came here naked, we're going to die, not hauling a U-Haul with stuff.
Right.
Or treasure.
You can't buy your way into heaven.
Right. And the accounts, no matter how large or small, they don't echo into eternity.
Yeah.
It's all temporal. So with that in mind, babe, you had some insight on Proverbs 10 that I thought was just some great practical takeaways.
Well, essentially what I was saying about Proverbs 10, 4 through 5, it's talking about your willingness to work hard for what you're going to earn, right? So it's like we need to earn money. So I would say just like work hard, remain consistent in your spending, your saving, and living on the rest. And just being wise with that. And that's something from Dave Ramsey as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also planning ahead. And I think what we're talking about here with Allie's question is how do I set myself up for success financially as a young adult? And I think you're asking a great question. And I think a lot of people don't ask themselves this question until they think about retirement.
Wow.
So I've talked to so many people that are 55 and they just start talking about money, saving, finances. They've been living paycheck to paycheck. They've been living in the red. They've been just unaware or blissfully unaware of how money functions, or if there's a spouse that takes care of all the finances and they're kind of just left out in center field, not knowing what's what and how much they have. So being mindful of your earnings, of your spending habits, and remaining consistent and planning ahead. So Josiah's probably gonna unpack those, but I'll just share a fun story. So we just came back from a trip. We were on a plane and it was a mother and daughter. She's in the education system and she's like, yep, I know that what I signed up for, I'm not getting paid the most, but I've been in this for 20 plus years. And prior to that, I was in something else for 15 years, but I really felt that this was the direction God was calling me. So she's in the classroom still, I think at age like 55.
Yep.
And then her daughter just graduated from a local university, and her daughter, I guess, got an incredible job. Like she landed a job as, I don't know, in the, what is it called? Healthcare, and they have an HR department, all that kind of stuff. Just the ins and outs of that. So her mom's like, yeah, she's getting paid very well. And the daughter's like, yeah, I'm getting paid well, but I also am aware of how I want to live. And so she chooses a more expensive route of living, whether that's a Starbucks every day, whether that's frequent travel, whether that's nice clothes and prestigious, whatever, accessories, that's up to her. But I said, I'm like, you know what? I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
As a 22 or 25-year-old, I think she's 25.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you as a 25-year-old to recognize how much you're getting paid, how you want to live your life, and your spending habits. Because that always doesn't always align with people's habits. But she's realizing I got to work hard for the job that I have and I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to remain consistent in my spending and realizing that every dollar, I don't want to end up in the red ever and live paycheck to paycheck. But also she seemed to be one that would plan ahead for the future. Like I feel like she'd have parents like, do you have a 401k? Do you have a retirement plan? Do you have X, Y, and Z? So I will just say, like, you can be 25 and successful, and you can be 55 and not successful, or you can be vice versa. And we're just here to kind of coach you through some things that Josiah has learned, that one of our financial advisor friends that he's in the industry has learned. But yeah, I just thought it was a fun encounter with a 25-year-old.
It was so fun.
It was awesome.
It was so fun. Allie is one of our target listeners who's asking this question. How do I set myself up for success as a young adult? And I think Annika, the 25-year-old from the Twin Cities, who just graduated from a great school with undergrad, grad school. She got her first job. She's renting an apartment in North Loop. She's dating a guy, working a good paying job. Like, people in their 20s and 30s, you're young adults. You're listening to this FYI podcast, and we want to add value to you by not teaching our opinions, but our experiences of the Word of God in action. Because look, James, the half-brother of Jesus, said that faith without works is dead. So it's good to, Jesus taught that the wise builder was the builder who built his house on the solid rock. In other words, hearing God's word and putting it to action. And I think that what you do now in your 20s and 30s pays dividends later. What you do now counts. And so what a great question, Allie, and what a great conversation at the airport. And then here today is here. I want to unpack 4 things to do with money while you're in your 20s.
Ooh, let's hear it.
Because what you do now counts. So 4 things to do in your 20s with money, given, by the way, that you're paying taxes, given that, okay.
Do you have a job?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Number 1 would be avoid debt and pay off debt as quickly as possible.
Yep.
So the first thing that you want to do is avoid debt. Like, if you can't afford it, don't put it on the credit card. There's a favorite restaurant that I have, but I don't eat there very much because it's expensive. And so there's no reason to pay interest on a steak.
Right.
There's no reason to take out a loan for a car. It's like growing up, there was this commercial for second wind exercise or fitness and quick. And there was this guy with a mustache here in the Twin Cities, and he had this chain, this conglomerate of stores. His name was Dick Enrico, and his slogan was, "Why buy new when slightly used will do, except when the deals are this good." But that whole
Funny.
strategy of look, like utilize Facebook marketplaces, buy a used car versus having a car payment, live below your means. So even rent rather than going into debt with a mortgage. The biggest thing is avoid debt and pay off debt. Maybe you've got some student loans. Pay it off as quickly as you can.
Okay, talk about principle.
Oh gosh.
For people, like I didn't know this as a 20, 21, 22-year-old, that principle, what principle was when I was taking out student loans, even though I qualified for scholarships and grants. Like,
for sure.
It's a basic little thing that I wish I would have known even 1 year sooner. And some of the people I've met never put your loans on forbearance. Okay. I would say warning if you have to do that. Get a job, stop your education, regroup your finances, or whatever you have to do. But to put things on forbearance, meaning pause and have that interest rate potentially change, grow, kill you later. Like,
well, it's a great thing. I think it was Einstein who said that the eighth wonder of the world was compounding interest. And he said that those who understand it earn it. We'll come back to that. Those who don't understand it pay it. And so principal and interest is great when it's working for you. You put $5,000 into a high yield savings account and you're earning 5%, and you start collecting checks, your money's working for you.
Right.
You take out a $5,000 student loan or a $10,000 car, that's your principal amount that you borrowed to go to school or to put on the credit card for shoes and clothes or to get that car. But you're going to pay that money back plus interest. And so the terms of the loan, it's rate. Your interest rate is on top of the principal. How much of an interest rate? Maybe it's 6% on a student loan. Maybe it's 30% on a credit card. Maybe it's a 7% on your mortgage. But all loans are going to have an agreed upon interest rate.
Right.
And then time, what length of time? So you're stuck in like the average person who takes out a student loan is paying them off until they're 28 years old.
Right.
10 years. And so that's the first thing you want to do with money is avoid debt and pay it off as quickly as can. Maybe it's a side hustle. Maybe it's a garage sale. Maybe it's selling things. Maybe it's working hard and getting a raise at your job, a bonus. All of those things, put it towards debt elimination.
Can I say something from here?
Sure.
Okay, just a little keynote. So if you're if it's a car loan, if it's a house loan, or a house that you're paying off, if it's your education, whatever it is, if it's one of those three, or you have some credit card debt, you don't only have to pay the day they tell you. So if it's like January 1, X amount is due, maybe, you pay that. And then you have a second payment because you have some extra money in cash. You call that number, you write out another check, you pay towards the principal to get that interest rate to change, to get lower. So I would even say, like, we talked to some friends that she really didn't know finances, and the father of the household or her husband could not figure out, why is this credit card racking up so much bill? She was only paying the minimum
balance versus
the
entire balance.
And he was like, what have we been doing? And she's like, I didn't know. So you might have $500 on your credit card, but if it says your minimum payment is $40, pay off the $500 if you can, and pay any additional payments towards whatever loan you owe.
Good.
Because sometimes I think you forget that. If it's an automatic that comes out, you don't even know that you have it and see it. So if you have any extra cash, you don't only have to pay on that day. It might sound very simple-minded to some, but some people might not even know that. So,
babe, it's so good that you said that. The second thing to do with money in your 20s is to learn contentment and live on less than you make.
Yeah.
So if you're working a job, making $50K a year, spend less than that and learn contentment. And I think that where we find that we get discouraged or disappointed, it said that the thief of all joy is comparison.
Oof, yeah.
And no matter how much you earn or how much you make, there's almost always going to be somebody who's got more coming in.
Mhm.
And so don't let that comparison fuel greed or the love of money or and here's the message in your 20s, don't have the fear that you're falling behind because you're not. Don't worry about that. So learn contentment because godliness with contentment is great. Gain the third thing to learn and to do with money when you're in your 20s
Mhm.
is save and invest. And this is coming back to that eighth wonder of the world is when you can earn compounding interest and
Mhm.
not touch it, reinvest the dividends, reinvest that interest that you're earning, whether it's a high yield savings account, save and invest. This would also be like we were with some of our lifelong friends and they've actually retired early. And
Right.
so one of the questions I was asking about for them is like, gosh, hey, what do you do when your employer doesn't match anymore? Or
Mhm.
because if you have the opportunity to say open up a 401k
Yep.
and they might match say 3 to 5%. So if you save 3% of your income or 5%, find out whatever that match is. It is free money. And my first job
Mhm.
coming out of college, in the final interview, and the pastor, he was a lead pastor. I was working at a church, and he said, we've got a 4% match around here. So if you put in $4, we put in four, and it's free money. If you don't do it, you're fired.
That's somebody looking out for you.
It
But most
is.
employers won't. So get in contact with your HR director or
Yes.
somebody that can help you with your W-2s, your W-9s, like whatever work in numbers you got to work with, just do it. And I'll say, I just want to compliment this generation of my observation. I don't know if this is true or not, but this is my observation of the people that we've come across, is your generation of Gen Z is very thrifty. You guys are thrifty, meaning like I met this girl in a smaller town and she like works at a thrift store. Literally,
Yeah. Seriously.
like the stuff that she finds is awesome. And she's like, well, I never paid $400 for this. I just paid $4 for this.
Yep.
And it's like, so getting thrifty, not only with the things that you buy, but with your money. This is a little thrift factor right here of, you know what, find a matching program and talk to your HR director and say, hey, how can I get the biggest bang for my buck? And you know, what's going to help me in the long haul? Even if I'm not going to retire here, those things do add up over time.
Seriously, I think the fourth thing that's so vital, that's so important of something to do with your money while you're in your 20s is give and grow your generosity muscle.
That's good.
And I'll just tell you this, when Micah and I are presented with an opportunity to give,
Mhm.
we never look at it as manipulative.
Right.
If somebody asks for money, or maybe we're in a service, whether it's our church or not, and we love to give, and we kind of have, if there's money that we have
Mhm.
and we're asked, we try to give.
But I think there's a minimum amount that we've always agreed upon.
Yep.
Hey, if there's a missionary in church,
Yep.
this is a minimum we give. If we feel
Yep.
led to give
Yep.
more, we'll definitely do
Yep.
that. But
But I just look at like a lot of people look at giving and generosity and expressions of generosity through giving.
mhm.
And they'll look at it like, well, once I make six figures, I'll start tithing. Or once I start, like I heard Prof G talk on the Carrie Newhoff Leadership podcast, and he had said that he was really all about himself until he was financially bulletproof. And I think a
Wow.
lot of people have that viewpoint
Hmm.
of trying to like make sure that they're secure financially before they start expressing giving or generosity. But
Yeah.
man, I just think that
If you don't want to give between your ages of 20 and 30, you're never going to give when you're 30 and beyond.
I think you're right.
And it's kind of like this. I meet so many young adults like, well, I'll become a better Christian once I get married. I'll become the wife that I need to be once I get married. I'll become a better man and a husband and give up X, Y, and Z once I come be married. Well, once I'm married. No, like become the person that you're looking for is looking for now. Establish your spending habits, your rhythms, routines now, and discipline them.
Yeah.
Discipline them.
Yeah.
And God has given us a tool which can either fuel the dreams that you have in your heart and life, or they're going to be the dream killer.
Yep.
Debt is the dream killer of anything that you might have in your future.
The quick comment on debt, because that was the first thing as we talked about was debt elimination. I remember going to college as a freshman and I transferred in some credits through a program called PSEO where you can earn high school and college credits at the same time. But I made a major sacrifice. I'm an extrovert. And because of the PSEO, I was able to graduate in 3 years from that school instead of 4 with a bachelor's degree. I lived at home. And instead of paying tuition and room and board and books, my cost for that education was about half of the sticker price
Right.
because I lived with my parents and I commuted to school using a beater Jeep. It was like probably 10 or 12 years old while I was in college, and it was paid for with cash.
Yeah.
Probably cost like less than $4,000, had 150 some thousand miles on it, but it was bulletproof and it was great. It did the job getting point A to point B.
Yeah.
I say all that to say is I was able to not only graduate college, but I was able to graduate with an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, and master's degree debt free. If I can do it, I'm like an average Joe, an average Josiah. You can do it, and
Yeah.
you might, and you might have some student loans. I promise you, you can pay it off quicker than you think.
Well, and I'd say even with Josiah's story, like he count the cost. He did not have to spend an extra $30,000 for the experience on a college campus, living and eating and everything. When he was there every day, he had his classroom friends, and he just slept at his family's house. Like, you know, he didn't have to pay for the experience. And I think sometimes like we want to run from certain things, or we have to prove ourselves to our parents, or like we can do this. But there's a mindfulness that can come with that. There's wisdom, like we talked about from Proverbs earlier, that can come from dynamics of money and spending and lifestyle. And just, I just want to say, the lifestyle which you live in your 20s and 30s is probably not going to be the lifestyle you live in your 50s and 60s. By your time you're 40, 50, and 60, like your spending habits hopefully have been established, your disciplines will be established. Because I've come across, I'm a millennial, and I remember graduating from a university with business school, having the mindset of, well, I'm going to make 80 plus $1,000 in business, starting out my very first job, and I'm going to be able essentially to start at age 22 where my parents are at age 45. That's a fallacy to think that I am going to come in guns blazing, knowing everything, when I have so much to learn about business, now so much to learn about ministry and stuff like that. So, and maybe you're like, well, I do get paid that much. I get paid 250,000. That's great. But when you get older, you're at your lowest income, probably in your 20s to 30s that you'll ever be in your life, depending on your occupation. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I
Is
would
that
for
one of the
sure
ones?
agree. No, I would for sure agree. And I would ask this question if you're single and listening, or single and watching on YouTube, and marriage is a part of your preferred future in God's plan for your life. I look at it this way. A great question to ask is, what am I bringing into this marriage?
That's good.
Am I bringing debt into this marriage? Am I bringing baggage into this marriage? Am I bringing sin into this marriage? Or am I bringing stability and savings and some investments? And like Micah said, some stability. Like, I think one of the most attractive things, and this isn't saying people are gold diggers or money hungry. No. But I think one of the most attractive things that you can do is learn to be a steward of God. Because that doesn't, I didn't say have a big bank account or have a lot of money, but it's attractive to be a good steward.
Well, you can make $40,000 to $50,000 and be more rich than people who are making six figures, because your spending habits and disciplines making that money versus somebody who's going big and losing their home, essentially, you know?
Did you realize that of those who make six figures, 100,000 or more annually in the US, half of them live paycheck to paycheck? And so lifestyle creep is, I mean, super popular, and we all denied that would happen. And yet most of us are guilty of that to some extent. And the reason I brought up student loans and debt lists, which is a passion of mine, is our prayer for you is that you would be young and debtless.
That's so good.
And I would just say this, as far as being young and debtless, like the reason that that's been a part of our story, I knew that I was sensing a call to ministry, and most pastors and most churches are not in it for the financial reward.
Right.
We're in it for the eternal rewards of leading people into the hope of Jesus, and it changes their generation, and it changes future generations, and it changes eternity. But I would just say, like, graduating debt-free from college allowed me to enter our marriage with savings. It allowed me to enter my first job making $0. It allowed us to take some steps of faith when we both left our jobs to launch a nonprofit with no promise of a paycheck. And so it's not that we're adverse to risk. The dream part that Mike is talking about is when you handle money as a steward, you realize that everything I have, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it.
Yep.
And so how we wanted to close this episode, if it's cool, is I texted a financial advisor friend and I just said, hey, a young adult asked this question. Any major thoughts? Here's some of mine. And he goes, that's a great question. The first and most important thing comes from Matthew 6:33, which says, seek first the kingdom of God. And it comes with the promise that everything else will be provided. If God takes care of the lilies and the wildflowers, how much more does he care for you?
Yep.
He also talked about honoring your father and mother. It comes with another promise that you'll live a long life, that it'll go well with you. And he just encouraged, be generous with your time, talents, and treasure, that you can't outgive God. I loved this point that our friend said, practice delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Save and invest well, and you can buy stuff later.
Right.
Pay off your mortgage early, and I'll just go real talk. That's our goal. That's what we're working on, and we
chiseling away at.
We do have a mortgage. We're 5 years into roughly living in this home, and that's one of the things that we're working on. That we're, with God's help, and delayed gratification, and then meeting with the financial advisor to talk through protecting yourself from unexpected financial ruin, unexpected debt or death or disability. Insurance is cheap when you're young and healthy. Whether it's health insurance, life insurance, car insurance, home insurance, renter's insurance. Insurance and debt are separate, or insurance and investments are different categories, but you do want to
covering.
That's good. His other advice was time in the market was more important than timing the market. Start investing early and as often as possible, and talking to a tax professional can help as well. So that's
a lot of information in a short amount of time.
There you have it. So maybe you have other questions.
If not, we'll see you next time. This is the FYI podcast.